Welcome to this particular discussion on CAT versus GMAT. Which exam is more better for me? Now, it's not that this discussion means that these both exams are going to fight with each other, but we will try an understanding which one is better for me. What do you mean by that is which exam has a much higher chance of success, which exam is easier compared to the other, which are the sections that are more easier for you, and most importantly, right? See, these both exams are not the end goal. So, exams or whether CAT or GMAT or any exam for that matter is your entrance ticket for you to get an MBA admission, right? So, we'll understand what are the programs that you can apply for in India and abroad, etc., and then we'll quickly go through this discussion. Let's get started, guys. Now, first, foremost important thing is that I'm going to quickly run through the GMAT test structure. There's another video where we have explained in detail of how the GMAT test structure works, so you can quickly go through that for further deeper understanding. But here, what I wanted to cite is that we saw this section called as quantitative, right? Quantitative ability, where there are two kinds of question. One is your problem solving question, another is your data sufficiency question. Now, both these types of questions in math are probably what 10th standard level, okay, 10th standard level math. Very simple math, but the only challenge is the time given to solve one particular question. So it's a very basic level mathematics. The only concern is time. So as you practice, you can even master that. So the inference here is very simple, guys. GMAT math is comparatively much easier compared to CAT. I'm not saying GMAT math is very easy. Comparative to CAT, it's much easier. Wow, how is that so? I'll prove it, guys. Come on. Now look at this. If you look at the CAT structure, right, it is more or less similar. For example, it also has verbal, it also has data interpretation, logical reasoning, it also has quants. But if you look at the quant syllabus, right, it is much more broader. It's much more holistic. For example, you have mensuration, you have profit and loss, you have quadratic and linear equations, surge indices, geometric progression, logarithms. All these are a little bit more complicated. These are over your 10th grade levels of mathematics. You know, the quantitative section becomes a little bit more difficult. But again, guys, at this point, you can never conclude that which exam is more better for me, because difficulty in an exam is just one point. As I already told you, right, the journey beyond that, for example, for an MBA admission, the programs that you can apply, the acceptance rate of school is more critical to analyze. So let's go a little bit deeper to understand it further. Right now, let me put a table of comparison so much easier for you to visualize, right? So I'm taking these parameters as number of applicants, number of seats, success percentage, first cutoff to get a call. So as the name suggests, you understand it very clear, right? Number of applicants means all over the globe, how many people are applying for each and every exam. Number of seats means you write that particular exam, what are the options that is available for you? What are the total number of options that are available in that particular year is basically a number of seats. So ultimately, your success percentage is basically number of seats, okay, number of seats by number of applicants. Number of seats by number of applicants is basically a success percentage. So that determines how successful you are with that particular exam. And basically, first cutoff to get a call is that you write an exam, a score is generated in both these exams. In fact, in CAT, more than a score, a percentile is determined. Okay, so it is not just important how good you perform, it is also important how better you perform than the other person. So it's basically called as a percentile score. GMAT also has a score, okay, and it also has a percentile score. But the ideology is that more than the percentile score, the GMAT score is more considered. So it is typically about testing your own strength. Your competitive strength is also tested a little bit unlike compared to CAT. Let's quickly run through that. Now, if you take the CAT exam, right, every year 2.4 lakh people appear for that particular exam. I'm talking about this CAT exam only in India. See, CAT is an exam which is typically administered in India. 95 to 98% of the people who apply for CAT exam are Indians. So, whereas if you look at GMAT, 2.5 lakh people appear. Whereas this is a global statistics, which means not just in India, okay? All over the globe, cumulatively put together, 2.5 lakh people appear. So, nothing can be inferred from here. Let's go further. Now, if you look at the number of seats, as I already told you, what does number of seats means? You write the exam, what are the options or the numbers that are available for you at that particular year. If you look at CAT, right, I would report roughly around 2,600 seats are only available. What do you mean by that is, I'm typically looking at the top 6 IIMs in India. The other IIMs are not really very well ranked compared to the top 6 IIMs. I'm not saying don't go for that IIM, but that should typically be your backup option or the last chance. So your top 6 IIMs must be your first preference. Of course, there are other institutes like XLRI, for which you need to write this exam called as SAT, very similar to CAT, or you can apply for IIFT, or there are many other B schools, for example, NMIMS, okay, SPJ, all these schools accepted GMAT CAT score. So cumulatively, roughly it's around 3,000 seats, guys. Okay, roughly around 3,000 seats. So now this is an interesting fact. Look at this. Let me just clear the screen off. Okay, The number of applicants is 2.4 lakhs. Number of people who crack the exam or have the option to get into a B school is around 2,600 to 3,000. Okay, so if you determine the success percentage, where this becomes a numerator, this becomes a denominator, the success percentage is approximately 1 or even less than 1%. So what is the meaning of that is very simple, guys. If 100 people appear for the CAT, okay, only one guy will get a seat or admission in one of the very good B schools in India. Okay, so, and the other thing, okay, let's say you are even in the top 1 percentile or the top 2 percentile, the first cutoff for you to get a call. It is not just important you crack the exam, okay, it is also important you are relatively much better than others, okay. So the first cutoff for you to even get a call in the top 6 IMs is anywhere between 95 to 99 percentile. Okay, see, a 90th percentile might be a good guy. He might have cracked all the questions, he might have got an excellent score. But the problem is there is so much competition that you need to overperform others as well. Now, if you look at the opposite picture of this particular scenario, right? You take the GMAT exam, although the number of applicants is massive, around 2.5 lakh applicants every year. If you look at the number of seats that you can get into for an MBA or an MIM, now what is this MIM is something interesting, I'll explain later. If you look at both these options, 1 lakh seat are available. Okay, when I'm saying 1 lakh seat, I'm comparing it very similar with CAT exam. In CAT exam, I took the top 6 IMs. So here I'm taking the top 100 B schools. Now why top 100 B schools is that? If you look at the IMs, right, of the top 6, only the top 3 IMs are listed in the top 100 B schools, which means the 97 other B schools which are top 100 in the entire world are outside India. And look at the number of seats, around approximately 1 lakh. So that determines a success percentage as 40 to 50%, much higher compared to the CAT exam. So what is the meaning of 40 to 50%? Is very simple. 2 guys write the GMAT exam. Okay, 2 guys write the GMAT exam. 1 guy gets a seat. Okay, 1 guy gets a seat. Very simple, guys. Compared to 100 people competing with you, you can easily compete with 1 guy. Very easier. Okay, and another interesting thing. Okay, for example, your GMAT score, I think you know, right? It ranges from bare minimum score of, let's say, 550 or even 600 to almost 720, 740, or even out of 800 you get. Okay, now the interesting part is that even a 600 score, okay, 600 is basically what, a 55th percentile score, can get a call from an MBA school. Okay, whereas here in India you require 95 to 99 percentile. So can we confess or can we infer that, you know, GMAT is a much preferable exam for you, therefore let me go and write GMAT? Not really, let's hold on, but at this point of time we can come to a conclusion. CAT and GMAT scores 0.01. Let's go further. Okay, now let's look at the sections, okay, which section is more easier in which exam. Now if you look at CAT, right, as I already told you, right, this section called as data interpretation has been very tough for the past 2 to 3 years. Similarly in GMAT also there is a section called as integrated reasoning, very similar to IR in CAT exam, is also equally tough. I'm not saying it's much easier, but the irony is that your integrated reasoning score is not considered as part of your main score. That is an interesting part, because when you report GMAT scores, how do you report is that you report your AWA scores, you report your IR scores, you report your quant and verbal scores, and your total score. Okay, gross total score you report. So your IR score is always separate. Now why this is very interesting is that, let us say you want to become a social entrepreneur. Okay, you want to become a social entrepreneur. So that's your MBA specialization that you're going to accept for. If you look at B schools, when they accept you for a social entrepreneurship, this section is not really strongly considered. But this section becomes very critical when you want to apply for a finance role. So there's always this flexibility, okay? Your strengths are only tested on what you are strong at. Something that is not very, applicable to is not really considered as part of your scoring. That flexibility is there, right? And you know that math, I already told you, math and CAT is very tough, right? In fact, it's the world's toughest exam, people say that. But whereas this is interesting, you look at the GMAT, right? Since people compete all over the globe, the Indian scores of average score of 45 out of 60, okay, which is roughly around 75 percentile. Look at the irony. An American scores only 35, which is around 45 percentile. So we have a much relatively much better competence compared to Americans, who are generally considered as the best score getters in this entire world. So that's an interesting part of it. And this is the best part, guys. Your CAT score are unfortunately valid only for 1 year. Which means if you're very sure shot of going for an MBA, you have to prepare for CAT, and that particular year itself you have to apply. Whereas GMAT has this flexibility of having a validity for 5 years. What do you mean by that? Very simple, guys. You decide when you want to write the exam. You can take the exam, not apply in the very same year itself. For example, even if you apply for a B school, if you don't get an admit from one of the very good B schools, absolutely fine. Why? Because your scores are valid for 5 long years. So you have 4 more years of application rounds. You can use the same GMAT score and apply for it. So you can see that there are much more advantages compared to the CAT exam. So again, can we conclude very easily that GMAT is much recommended than CAT? At this point of time, we can clearly see that the score is 0 and 2. GMAT is much more relatively easier and also has much wider options. Let's understand further. Okay, now that you're very clear that you have more confidence in cracking the GMAT compared to the CAT exam, is the journey over there? Definitely not. Why? Because what happens after your CAT or GMAT exam? You have to apply for an MBA program either in India or abroad. So let's look at what are the options that are available with your CAT exam as well as a GMAT exam. Let's quickly run through that. Now, what are the programs that you can apply? If you take CAT exam in India, obviously the top 6, I mean not just the top 6, all the IIMs across India, your official score for getting an admit or applying for an MBA admission process is basically a CAT exam. So 20 plus IIMs accept. And by the way, there are some very interesting masters in management program. It's called as MIM in IITs, which accept your CAT score. Great Lakes Institute, where I did my MBA from, accept your CAT score. IMT, MDI, FMS Delhi, all of these schools accept your CAT scores. Okay, but the interesting fact here is this, guys. Okay, of all these IIMs and other good base schools, only IIM ABC are there in the top 100 ranks, which is typically ranked 33, 47 and 49. Okay, recently the rankings have been developed. IIM Calcutta has been ranked number 17 for an MIM program and not for an MBA program. Whereas if you look at GMAT, right, very good B school in India, Indian School of Business, accept only your GMAT score. They will not accept a CAT score. Similarly, Great Lakes also accepts GMAT score. SP Jain also accepts GMAT score. SDA Bocconi, it's a very interesting school. It's an Italy-based school, ranked 31st globally. It has its Asia campus here in Mumbai, in India. Whereas ISB is ranked number 24. IIMs are ranked much lower. So in India, GMAT does not have so much options like your CAT exam has. But what is interesting here is abroad. If you look at abroad, right, the fact that most of them don't know that CAT is also accepted across 30 plus institutes. Okay, whereas GMAT is accepted across 2000 plus institutes, massive number of seats. And I'm just considering not all the 2000 because you can't get into a random B school abroad. If you consider the top 100 B schools, there are plenty of seats available. I already showed you the number, roughly around 1 lakh seats that are available. Okay, and if you look at MBA as a program, right, CAT is applicable for applying for an MBA in India, whereas GMAT is also equally applicable. There's another interesting program called as Masters in Management. Okay, now there's another video where we explain detail about why MIM is much better or more preferable to a college student or a working professional in the early stage compared to an MBA program. So whereas your CAT exams, your scores are not acceptable for an MIM. Very few B schools accept it, whereas a GMAT is accepted. And most interestingly, see, when you want to do your master's, right, not everybody is suitable for an MBA. For example, a person who has very strongly worked in a technical background for the past 2 to 3 years, applying for an MBA would not really make sense for him. A guy who's worked in finance, who's worked in consulting, or let's say in operations, logistics, marketing, these people are more eligible for MBA. So a guy who's worked in a strong technical background, there are programs called as techno-managerial program. We have much more videos regarding explaining what is this techno-managerial program, why it is better than an MBA. If you look at this techno-managerial program, which are highly recommended for people who come from technical background, CAT exam is not accepted for any of these B schools across the globe, okay? Whereas a GMAT is applicable for that. So in terms of the number of programs that opens up to you, yes, CAT exam wins over this particular statistics of India, okay? Very clearly, you have a lot of options in India, I'm not denying that. But if you look at it on a global level in terms of success percentage and number of seats, GMAT really scores much better compared to the CAT exam. So we can also award this point probably half to CAT and probably 2.5 to GMAT exam. Much more relatively better. Right. Now, finally, guys. So this gives us to a conclusion that, looking at overall statistics in terms of number of seats, okay, in terms of the competition, which is called as success percentage, okay, or let's say in terms of the programs that you can apply, or let's say in terms of the difficulties of sections, okay, on all these factors, it's very clear that GMAT has a much higher chance of success or easier or much preferable or more recommended compared to the CAT exam. So based on these facts, you can probably come to a conclusion that GMAT is relatively a much better choice compared to your CAT exam. So hopefully this video helped you to make a conclusion that which exam is more better for you. To understand more and more, for example, we just looked at different programs in India and abroad, right? So to understand more and more such programs, more and more P schools that you can apply to, you can continue watching our videos. Thank you very much. All the very best.